Have you ever looked at your life and thought, God, why is this taking so long? Maybe it's a prayer you've been praying, a dream you've been chasing, or a breakthrough you've been waiting for. You feel the pressure, the anxiety, the worry, and yet nothing seems to happen. But here's the truth. God's clock never misses. You see, our sense of timing is limited. We see the seconds, the days, the months, and sometimes even years. But God operates on eternity time. His timing is perfect, and his purposes are flawless. When he says it's time, everything aligns, your circumstances, your opportunities, even the people around you. Think about Abraham and Sarah. They waited decades for a promise that seemed impossible. Yet, when God's timing came, it wasn't early, it wasn't late, it was perfect. Isaac was born, not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. That's how God works. God's clock also works in reverse. Sometimes he delays not to disappoint you, but to prepare you. He is working behind the scenes, molding your character, equipping you with wisdom, patience, and strength, so that when the moment comes, you are ready to walk in his plan without stumbling. Another thing to remember is that God's timing is protective. Sometimes we think we're ready for something, but God knows we're not. He knows what could happen if we moved ahead of him. So instead of rushing, trust his delays. The delay is not denial, it's divine orchestration. And then there's the peace that comes when you trust God's timing. Worry disappears when you remember God is never early, never late, always right on time. When you surrender your schedule, your dreams, your fears to him, you step into a supernatural peace that no man, no circumstance can take away. So as you face seasons of waiting, remember God's clock never misses. Your breakthrough is coming. Your doors are opening. Your prayers are being answered. Just stay faithful, keep trusting, and remember that his time is perfect, even when yours feels flawed. When it comes to life, one of the most challenging things to accept is the timing of God. We live in a world that moves fast. We are constantly measuring success by speed, how quickly a goal is achieved, how fast a problem is solved, how soon a prayer seems to be answered. Yet, the reality is that God's timing is not measured by minutes or hours or days. It is measured by divine wisdom, infinite knowledge, and perfect purpose. When God acts, it is never too early, never too late, and always exactly right. What we perceive as delay or waiting is often God working quietly behind the scenes, setting things in motion according to his perfect plan. Many people struggle with this because they look at their circumstances through the lens of impatience, fear, or frustration. They see a closed door and assume that God has forgotten them. They see the hands of the clock moving and feel the pressure of time slipping away. But the truth is, God never miscalculates. What he allows to take time is part of a greater orchestration that we cannot fully see or understand. Think about a farmer planting seeds. He cannot will the seed to grow faster. He can water it, provide sunlight, and care for the soil, but he cannot control the germination. The growth process happens in its appointed season. It is the same with God's timing in our lives. He plants promises in our hearts and begins to align circumstances, people, and opportunities to bring them to fruition. But these things take time. They require seasons of preparation, growth, and refinement. Sometimes the waiting is the essential work being done in us. God is developing patience, cultivating trust, and refining our character, so that when his timing comes, we are ready to receive his blessing in fullness. When we try to rush ahead, we risk missing the alignment, the readiness, or even the fullness of what God has prepared for us. History is full of examples of God's perfect timing. Think about Joseph. He was sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused and thrown into prison. To anyone watching from the outside, it seemed like his life was off track. It seemed like God had forgotten him. But in God's perfect timing, Joseph's season in Egypt positioned him to save an entire nation from famine. The delay was not denial. The imprisonment was not punishment. Every moment was purposeful. Every trial was orchestrated to place him exactly where he needed to be when the moment of fulfillment arrived. Had Joseph acted out of impatience or tried to escape the process, he would have missed the divine appointment God had set for him. This illustrates that our understanding of too late is not God's reality. His timing is always perfect, even when we cannot comprehend it. Understanding God's timing also requires faith. Faith is the willingness to trust a plan we cannot yet see. It is the confidence that God is working even when there is no visible evidence of progress. It is the quiet assurance that his promises will be fulfilled, even if the calendar in front of us tells a different story. When we recognize that God's clock never misses, we begin to see waiting differently. Waiting is no longer a period of frustration. It becomes a period of opportunity. It is a time for spiritual growth, for building resilience, and for aligning our hearts with his will. Waiting becomes a sacred space in which God molds us, teaches us, and prepares us for the blessings that are coming. The key to embracing God's perfect timing is surrender. Surrendering our plans, our schedules, and our expectations to him allows his wisdom to take the lead. It is understanding that we are not in control, but he is. It is trusting that even when life seems uncertain, even when doors remain closed, God is working in ways that are beyond our comprehension. His timing is never flawed. His purpose is never delayed. Every delay, every detour, every pause in life is part of his master plan. When we align ourselves with his timing, we find peace, direction, and confidence in our journey. Recognizing the perfection of God's timing transforms the way we live. We stop comparing our timeline with others. We stop rushing and forcing outcomes. We learn to wait with hope, to trust with patience, and to act in alignment with his guidance rather than our impulsive desires. God's timing is perfect because it encompasses every detail. Our growth, our readiness, and the fulfillment of his promises. When we operate within that timing, we step into a life marked by blessings that are complete, opportunities that are divinely orchestrated, and peace that surpasses understanding. There is freedom in knowing that God's clock never misses, and that his perfect timing will always prevail over our human impatience. Life often feels like a series of waiting rooms. We want things to happen now, answers to prayers, opportunities to open, breakthroughs to arrive. But God frequently works on a timetable that seems slower than ours. These delays, however, are not signs of neglect or failure. They are opportunities for preparation. God is never idle during our waiting periods. In fact, he is actively shaping, equipping, and preparing us for the very thing we are praying and hoping for. What we perceive as a setback is often the most crucial part of the journey. It is in the waiting, in the delay, that God builds within us the capacity to handle what is coming. Consider a professional athlete. No one becomes a champion overnight. They spend years training, building strength, mastering technique, and learning endurance. The delay between talent and victory is a season of preparation. The same principle applies to the spiritual and practical blessings God has promised us. When God delays, he is giving us time to grow, to learn, and to mature. He is strengthening our faith, teaching us patience, and developing a resilience that can withstand the pressures of life once the blessing arrives. Without preparation, we might receive the promise but be unable to handle it wisely. This concept is seen repeatedly in Scripture. Take Moses, for example. He was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, yet he spent 40 years in the desert preparing for that role. He had the calling, but he needed the preparation. During that time, he learned leadership, humility, patience, and reliance on God. When the moment finally came, he was ready. Had God rushed the process, Moses might have failed, and the people he was meant to lead would have suffered. God's delays were not denials, they were preparation for a higher purpose. Delays also prepare our hearts. Sometimes we pray for things that, if we receive them immediately, could overwhelm us. God understands that readiness is not just about ability. It is also about perspective and maturity. Waiting allows us to develop a deeper understanding of ourselves, our faith, and our dependence on Him. It allows us to learn lessons that shape how we handle blessings with wisdom and gratitude. Just as a craftsman patiently shapes raw material into a masterpiece, God patiently shapes our hearts, character, and perspective during seasons of waiting. Another reason for delays is to refine our focus and align us with God's will. In the waiting, distractions fade and priorities become clearer. We learn to rely not on our strength, but on His. We learn that timing is not accidental, but intentional. Every delay has a purpose, even if it is hidden from us in the moment. Often what seems like a detour or setback is actually God steering us on to the path we need to walk. His preparation ensures that we are not only ready for the blessings themselves, but for the responsibilities and challenges that accompany them. Patience becomes one of the greatest byproducts of this preparation. The longer we wait, the more we understand that God's process cannot be hurried. We learn to trust Him more deeply, knowing that He is always working for our good. This trust strengthens faith and builds endurance. When the blessing finally arrives, it is not just about receiving a gift. It is about stepping into a life that we are ready to live fully and faithfully. Without the preparation, a moment of blessing could be overwhelming or even wasted. It is also important to recognize that preparation is often unseen. God works behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, teaching lessons, and orchestrating events in ways we cannot perceive. We may look around and see nothing happening, but in reality, every delay is purposeful. Every season of waiting has a divine blueprint. When we surrender to this process, rather than grow frustrated or impatient, we discover that God is actively preparing us for the exact season He has designed. Finally, understanding that delays are preparation shifts the way we respond to life. Instead of becoming anxious, frustrated, or resentful, we learn to embrace the waiting period as a sacred space where growth, wisdom, and readiness take place. We begin to trust that what is coming is worth the wait. We realize that God's delays are never mistakes and His timing is never off. The preparation He provides ensures that when the breakthrough arrives, we are ready to walk into it with faith, strength, and purpose, equipped to handle all that He has in store. There are moments in life when we look at closed doors and unanswered prayers and feel discouraged, thinking that God has forgotten us or our timing is off. Yet one of the most powerful truths to understand is that sometimes God delays things not to punish us or deny us, but to protect us. His timing is not just perfect, it is purposeful. What seems like a setback or a delay is often a safeguard against harm, disappointment, or failure. God knows the potential consequences of receiving something too soon or stepping into a situation unprepared, and He lovingly holds back until the right moment. Think about the story of David. Before he became king, he faced years of waiting, fleeing from Saul, and surviving trials that tested his courage and faith. From the outside, it looked like God was delaying His promise, but every step of the way was protective. David was learning to trust God, to lead with integrity, and to rely on divine wisdom rather than his own strength. Had he been made king too early, he could have been overwhelmed by the responsibility and his people might have suffered. God's timing ensured that David was prepared to lead effectively and that his reign would fulfill the purpose God intended. Delays in this sense are shields. They protect us from premature exposure, from circumstances we are not yet equipped to handle, and from mistakes that could derail the blessings God has planned. Protection through delay also applies to the choices we make. Life is filled with opportunities that can look good but are not right for us. God's timing prevents us from rushing into situations that could compromise our faith, our character, or our destiny. When we sense frustration because doors remain closed, it is often God guiding us away from what could harm us, even if we cannot see it. He sees the bigger picture, the full scope of what is coming, including potential pitfalls, and He positions us in such a way that when the right door opens, we are stepping into safety, alignment, and purpose. In addition, delays protect our hearts. Sometimes we are emotionally unprepared to receive a blessing, to handle a responsibility, or to face a challenge. God's delay allows our hearts to mature. It gives us time to develop the wisdom, discernment, and patience necessary to respond to life in a way that honors Him. Without this protective timing, we might receive what we prayed for, but misuse it, lose it, or be broken by it. Waiting is not a punishment, it is a divine buffer, giving us the time to grow, heal, and strengthen ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. The story of Joseph in the Bible is a perfect example of God's protective delay. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly imprisoned. From a human perspective, it seemed like God's promise to him had failed. But in reality, every step of Joseph's long wait was protecting him and preparing him for the responsibility he would eventually bear as a leader in Egypt. Had God delivered Joseph immediately into power, he would not have had the wisdom, experience, or maturity to manage the famine, protect his family, and fulfill God's larger plan. What looked like a delay was actually divine protection at work. Understanding that delays are protective changes how we respond to life's waiting periods. We can choose to panic, worry, or take matters into our own hands, often creating more problems. Or we can choose to trust, knowing that God's timing safeguards our journey. This perspective transforms waiting from a period of frustration into a period of trust, patience, and growth. It allows us to see that every closed door is not rejection, but redirection, and that every delay is not denial, but divine protection. Protection through delay also reminds us that God's perspective is eternal. He sees past the immediate moment, past the temporary discomfort, past the visible struggle. He knows the full consequences of early or ill-timed action and orchestrates circumstances in a way that shields us while positioning us for ultimate success. His delay is always intentional, always loving, and always designed to ensure that when His plans unfold, we are ready, safe, and able to walk in the fullness of His purpose. Recognizing this truth allows us to embrace patience, to surrender control, and to trust that what seems like waiting is actually divine safeguarding. We stop trying to force outcomes, stop comparing our timelines to others, and stop becoming anxious about delays. Instead, we rest in the knowledge that God is protecting us, guiding us, and orchestrating our path with precision. Every delay carries with it an element of divine care, a shield against harm, and a preparation for what is to come. In this way, trusting God's timing is not only about patience, but also about understanding that His love is active, His wisdom is perfect, and His clock never misses. Trust is the cornerstone of peace in the life of anyone who seeks to follow God. It is one thing to believe that God exists. It is another to trust that He is actively working in every detail of your life. Peace does not come from circumstances, from wealth, from achievements, or from the absence of trials. Peace comes from trusting God's timing, His plan, and His wisdom, even when life seems uncertain or confusing. When we surrender our need to control, our fear of the unknown, and our desire for instant results, we open ourselves to a peace that surpasses human understanding. This peace is not temporary or dependent on what is happening around us. It is enduring and rooted in the unshakable confidence that God is in control. The Bible frequently reminds us that those who trust in God are not shaken by the storms of life. Consider the words of Isaiah, who said, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you." Trust acts like an anchor in turbulent waters. It stabilizes the heart when anxiety wants to take over. When we choose to trust God, we are choosing to believe that He knows more than we do, that His perspective is perfect, and that His timing is flawless. This trust is not passive. It requires an active decision to place confidence in His promises, to believe His words over our fears, and to rest in the assurance that He is working for our good, even when we cannot see the full picture. Trust and peace are closely connected because the act of trusting shifts our focus from what we cannot control to what we know is secure, God's presence and His faithfulness. Life often tempts us to worry about outcomes, deadlines, and uncertainties. We try to orchestrate results on our own, manipulate circumstances, or rush ahead without guidance. But worry and peace cannot coexist. Anxiety arises when we focus on what we do not know or cannot manage. Peace grows when we focus on the truth that God's plan is perfect and that His timing is always right. Trust clears the mental clutter and emotional chaos, allowing God's peace to take root in our hearts. Consider the story of Peter walking on water. When he fixed his eyes on Jesus and trusted Him, he was able to step out of the boat and walk on the stormy sea. But the moment he focused on the wind and waves, doubt crept in, fear took hold, and he began to sink. Trust keeps us anchored in God's presence and power. It reminds us that no matter how overwhelming the circumstances may appear, His hand is guiding every step, and His plan is unfolding with precision. The peace that comes from trusting God is not dependent on the absence of storm, but on the knowledge that God is greater than the storm. Trust also enables us to release control, which is essential for experiencing peace. Many of us try to control outcomes because we fear disappointment or failure. We become impatient with delays, frustrated by closed doors, and anxious about the unknown. But trusting God means acknowledging that He sees the beginning from the end, that He knows what is best for our lives, and that He is orchestrating every detail. When we release our need to control, we free ourselves from the burden of worry and allow God's peace to fill the spaces we were trying to manage ourselves. Faith and trust are cultivated over time. Each time we step into a situation, make a decision based on God's guidance, and witness His faithfulness, trust grows stronger. Each trial, each unanswered prayer, each season of waiting is an opportunity to reaffirm confidence in His timing and His plan. With every experience, we learn that God does not fail, that His promises are true, and that His clock never misses. Trust is reinforced through reflection, prayer, and obedience. As trust grows, peace deepens. We begin to understand that the calm in our hearts is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of God's faithful guidance in the midst of it. Trust also transforms the way we interact with others. When we are anchored in God's peace, we respond with patience, grace, and understanding rather than frustration or anger. We become a source of calm in a chaotic world, demonstrating the reality of God's presence through our attitude and actions. Our trust inspires others to believe, showing them that peace is available even when life does not make sense. Ultimately, trusting God leads to peace because it aligns our hearts and minds with the truth of His sovereignty. It shifts our focus from what we fear, from what is uncertain, and from what we cannot control, to what we know is steadfast, unchanging, and reliable, God's love, His promises, and His perfect timing. When we choose trust, we are choosing peace, and that peace carries us through the storms, sustains us in the waiting, and empowers us to live with confidence, hope, and joy, knowing that God's plan is perfect and His clock never misses. Faithful patience is one of the most powerful yet underappreciated virtues in the life of a believer. In a world that values speed, instant results, and immediate gratification, learning to wait faithfully can feel counterintuitive. But the truth is, blessings that are rushed often lack depth, stability, and impact. It is in the discipline of patient faith that God's promises are fully realized. Faithful patience is not passive, it is active trust. It is standing firm in belief, holding on to God's promises, and living faithfully while the timing seems delayed. It is the practice of trusting that every moment of waiting has a divine purpose and that the blessings we seek are being prepared in ways we cannot yet see. The Bible is full of examples that illustrate the power of faithful patience. Abraham and Sarah waited decades for the promise of a child. Imagine the pressure, the doubts, the impatience that must have arisen as the years passed. Yet Abraham did not abandon God's promise. He remained faithful. He trusted that God's timing was perfect, and as a result, Isaac was born, a child who would become the father of nations. Their patience unlocked a generational blessing. This story reminds us that blessings come in their perfect season, not a moment earlier or later. When we attempt to force timing or take shortcuts, we risk undermining the fullness of what God intends for us. Faithful patience also requires endurance in the face of trials and uncertainty. Waiting is rarely comfortable. It tests our resolve, challenges our faith, and sometimes stretches us to the point of exhaustion. Yet it is precisely through these seasons of waiting that our character is strengthened and our dependence on God deepens. Patience builds resilience, helping us navigate not only the waiting period, but also the responsibilities and challenges that accompany the blessings once they arrive. Those who endure faithfully are often better equipped to handle success, influence, and impact because they have been molded by the waiting process. Blessings unlocked through patience are often more meaningful than those received immediately. When we wait, we grow spiritually, emotionally, and even mentally. We learn to value what we receive, understanding it as the product of divine orchestration rather than human effort alone. Patience gives us a deeper appreciation for the fulfillment of God's promises. It allows us to savor the moment and recognize God's hand in the journey. When blessings arrive at the right time, they are richer, fuller, and aligned with the purpose for which they were intended. Another essential aspect of faithful patience is the cultivation of trust. Patience cannot exist without trust. We cannot wait faithfully if we do not believe that God is capable of fulfilling his promises. Each day of waiting is an exercise in trusting that God's plan is perfect, that his timing is flawless, and that he is orchestrating circumstances to bring about the best possible outcome. Trusting him allows us to move through life with confidence rather than anxiety, knowing that delays are not denials and that the blessings ahead are worth the wait. Faithful patience also influences our actions during the waiting period. It does not encourage inactivity, rather, it inspires purpose-driven living. While waiting, we are called to prepare, grow, and position ourselves for the opportunities that God is orchestrating. We pursue personal development, strengthen our relationships, and deepen our spiritual lives. Patience is active. It is not merely enduring time, but using it wisely while trusting God to open the next door at the right moment. In doing so, we align ourselves with God's timing, ensuring that when the blessing arrives, we are ready to embrace it fully. Furthermore, faithful patience builds hope. Hope is strengthened when we witness the faithfulness of God in previous seasons. When we see the hand of God move in unseen ways.
I'll be all right. You don't have to stay. If you've already chosen, I won't stand in your way. I can feel it in your distance, in the way you barely speak, like your heart is somewhere else now, somewhere I can't reach. I was trying just to hold us while you slowly slipped away. Now I'm left with all the silence you didn't want to say. Maybe I just held on to something already gone. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. We don't need to fake the feeling, I can see it in your eyes. There's no reason left for staying when the love already died. Through the quiet in your voice, I can hear your choice. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. I don't need a reason why, I can see it in goodbye. And it breaks me, yeah, it does, but I won't ask you to stay. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. I'll be all right.